Welcome to the tutorial for the Sidley skirt. We're going to start by doing the side panels. So here's our side skirt panel and this is your side yoke. So the yoke is smaller than the side panel because we're going to gather this edge into the yoke. Okay, let's put the yoke to one side. You've got two notches which denotes the side seam in this instance. And you'll see it's narrower at the top and flared out a bit towards the hem so you don't get it upside down. You've got four of these, so I'm going to just take one and I'm going to stitch my gathering threads across the top. I'm using a contrast thread here, so hopefully it shows up better for you. And I'm stitching my first row on a size 5 length stitch, a centimetre away from the raw edge at the top of the panel, back tacking to start because my machine automatically does it. And then the second row is halfway between that original one and the raw edge. So there you go, you can see those quite clearly, two gathering threads. Now I need my yoke again. I've got a notch that denotes the side seam on my yoke, it's just a single one. That's my double, so I know that's my side seam. So that top one will be perfect. Now I'm placing them right sides together, the bottom of the yoke to the top of the skirt panel. And I'm going to pin the raw edges together at the ends. And then grab my gathering threads carefully and give them a little pull. A little bit short on this. Okay, and I'm going to pull those both the same amount equally to make my gathers. And then I'm going to pin that other corner. I'm keeping my seam allowance, so the first centimetre and a half flat without gathering. And then just distributing the fullness evenly between those points. Okay, so when that skirt panel is the same length as the bottom of the yoke, we can pop some more pins in. So I'm stitching across here, back tack to start. I've reduced my stitch length back to 3 and I'm stitching pretty much on top of that first row of gathering threads that I stitched. Just redistributing the fullness as I go to try and sort of even it out. Keeping those raw edges together. Stitching to the end and then back tack to finish. There we go, that's one panel. That's what it looks like from the right side. Now I'm just going to overlock this raw edge. You could use a zigzag if you don't have an overlocker. And then I'm going to just press that seam allowance up towards the yoke without squashing my pleats, my gathers too much. There we go. Next we're going to stitch the side front seams. So you've got two front panels cut to the fold and you've got single notches, two single notches down the side here. I've also put a little snip on the fold at the top for the centre front. Let's separate these, I only need one. So let's open this out. So that's my centre front. Then I've got my two side panels here. Now I'm going to look for that little double notch near the top, near the yoke. There it is. So I know that is a side seam. So that panel goes to that side. Now this one, there's my double notch. So I know that panel goes to that side. So now I'm going to do right sides together. I'm going to match the top notch on the centre front panel to that seam at the bottom of the yoke. And I'm going to match my tops at the waist. Let's do that on the other side as well. Again, looking for that little notch, matching the seam to that notch. and then pinning at the waist as well. Obviously, if you're a newbie and you fancy more pins or tacking, it's always a good thing to do. There's another notch there, that's the single one. It's definitely worth taking your time and making a really good job. So matching the raw edges, working my way down to the hem. Great. Now I'm going to back tack to start at the waist, and then I'm going to stitch down towards the hem. There we go, that's our seam done. And I'm just going to overlock that now. Let's have a look from the outside, make sure we've got no tucks or anything in there. Ooh, one pin. That looks nice and flat. So I'll overlock this edge and I'll press that seam towards the centre front. There we go. That looks great already. So you can see much more clearly on the wrong side that that seam is pressed in towards the centre. Next, we're going to insert the zip. So this is my concealed zip or invisible zip. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull the coil open and give it a press. This sort of holds it open a little bit, so it makes it a bit easier to stitch. So you'll know you've done it because look, you can sort of see it's gone all narrow and wibbly wobbly and a bit weird, but that's good. So I pre-overlocked the sides seams of my front and back skirt. Your front and back are identical, so it doesn't matter which side you start with. So I'm going to do my zip up, and I've got the front of my zip here, and I'm going to turn it so that it's right sides together. So I've got the top of my zip, the right side of my zip to the right side of my skirt. Now I'm going to put a pin in the top. Knowing that that's now correct, I'm going to unzip it just because it's much easier to handle when it's unzipped. And then I'm just going to rest the edge of the tape against the edge of my overlocking and pin down. Newbies do tack. I'm going to stitch a stitch line right on the edge of the tape, and I'm going to stitch another one that's right into that coil. So first of all, I'm just using my ordinary foot, and I've just moved my needle across a little bit. If your machine doesn't have that function, then you can always use your zip foot for this process as well. So I'm just stitching literally the edges together. It just makes the next step a little bit easier to do. So don't worry, it doesn't have to be dead straight or perfect or anything. No one's going to see this. It's going to be enclosed in the yoke later anyway. And when you get down to the zip stopper, if you leave your needle in and then close your zip and then just carry on for that last little bit of tape. And like I said, don't worry if your stitching's a bit wibbly wobbly, it doesn't show. Now I'm changing to my zip foot. I've moved my needle across again there, and I'm just going to now open up that coil as much as possible. It's already been pressed flat, so it's much easier to do, and just get into that crease as much as I can. As I've got my zip foot on, I don't need to leave my needle in and close my zip. I can just keep going. Okay, so you've got your two stitch lines here. I'm going to close my zip. Oh, there we go. It's always a bit tricky until you've got both sides sewn. Great, that looks good. So now I need my other skirt side. So let's say I just put it in my front, then I need my back. So this is the side seam. And again, I'm putting the front of my zip, the right side of my zip, to the right side of my fabric on the side seam. And I'm going to put a pin in before I unzip it. There we go. And then I can pin as before. And basically you're going to repeat what you've just done on this side. So I'm just going to pin my tape to the side seam. Again, do tack it if you need to. It does, it can save such a lot of time if you're unpicking a lot. So it's sometimes worth just taking that little extra time to do a bit of a tack or put some seam tape in or something. Now I'm just checking to see if my yoke seams match. That looks pretty good, but I might just move that bottom one up a little bit. Just have a little jiggle there. Great. So same thing. One stitch right on the edge, one stitch right into the coil. And there we go. So we've got it joined only by the zip at the moment. Check that that's as close. If it's not close enough, you can go back in and do another stitch line. And then I'm just going to finish this hem now, stitching from a couple of centimetres up from the bottom of the tape of the zip, back tack to start. I've still got my zip foot on at this point, just because it's easier to get in underneath that zip. And then just stitching to the hem. Centimetre seam allowance as usual, back tack to finish. There we go, that's one seam done, and I'm going to press this seam open now. Okay, all pressed and nice, it's lying nice and flat. Let's have a look on the right side. That looks pretty good to me. Happy with that. So now we're going to do the side seam on the other side. So here's my skirt. I've got right sides together. I'm going to start by matching that yoke seam again. Start by pinning there and then at the waist. And then down the length of the skirt. So starting from the waist, back tack to start, stitch down towards the hem, 1 centimetre seam allowance. And let's press this open. Okay, there we go. It's starting to look like a skirt now. So now we're going to prepare the yoke facing. So you've got 2 of these. Cut to the fold, you've got 1 notch there, and I've also done a little snip at the centre front, centre backs. It's always useful to do that, get into the habit of doing that. It's a good thing. I'm using a different fabric because I didn't have enough of the other one. And I thought this Rose and Hubble's lovely. I've interfaced both the front and the back yoke. They're both exactly the same. So you can just stitch one side, right sides together, centimetre seam allowance, back tack to start, back tack to finish. Then I'm going to press this seam open. There we go. Now I just need to overlock or zigzag around this edge at the bottom. There we go, 1 prepped facing. So now we're going to attach the facing to the skirt at the waist. Here's my skirt. You can see I've got my zip open. And this is my side seam that's been stitched all the way. So I'm going to match that to the side seam on my yoke facing. Here we go. Seams together. So line those up. Pop a pin in. And then I've got those useful centre front, centre back marks. So I'll just pop those together. And then I'm folding my zip back, my zip tape, and I'm leaving my centimetre seam allowance on my yoke facing separate there, look. So it extends past the zip. So centre notches again. A few more pins around the top. And then again, I'm leaving that centimetre seam allowance. I'm folding the zip tape back on itself so it's all neat. Pop a pin in and then 1 more in there. So centimetre seam allowance again, stitching from the zip all the way around the top to the other zip. Back tack to start, back tack to finish. Here we go. I'm still using my white thread, so hopefully it will show up nicely for you. So we've stitched all around the waistline now. Just going to clip a few bits off around the waist. I'm not going to grade this seam. This cotton is so thin, I don't think it needs it. Now, although it's not a very deep curve, it is a little bit of a curve around here, so I'm just going to snip in every couple of centimetres or so that we just get a nice gentle curve when we turn it through. Now I'm going to press the seam allowance up towards the yoke. Okay, so you can see the seam allowance is pressed towards the yoke, and now I'm going to stitch just on the edge of the yoke all the way around. Off we go. I'm stitching right on the edge. Doesn't have to be quite so close. And again, it doesn't show because it will be on the inside, so don't worry about perfect stitching. Now I'm pressing that seam. There we go. Nice crisp waistline. Now I'm inside the skirt, as you can clearly see, that's my yoke facing, and I'm just going to run these seams together, this side seam just down to the bottom of the yoke facing, and I'm going to pop a pin in. So that's anchoring it down, and I know that that is exactly on the side seam. Now the next bit I would normally do over the ironing board, because you can open it out and get it just one layer and nice and flat and everything, but obviously I can't do that at the minute, so bear with me. I'm going to just smooth my fabric down. I'm starting from my side seam, working towards my back on my front centre, and I'm just going to pop some pins along the seam at the bottom of the yokes. So again, smoothing it out, making it as flat as possible so you don't get any pulling. Like I say, much easier on an ironing board. And then I'm moving along now to the other side and doing the same. So I'm just working methodically across, smoothing out as I go and popping some pins in, because I'm going to sink stitch or stitch in the ditch at the bottom of the yokes now. Okay, so I've got my centimetre extra still poking out, and I'm going to start 1.5 centimetres in from the zip, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch or sink stitch between that bottom of the yoke and the top of the skirt seam, all along, except for the centre front and centre back, because obviously they don't have that seam. So I'm just going to start and stop. Here we go. So again, as flat as possible, back tack to start, and just stitch as close as you can into that seam line. I'm using my white thread so it will show, but you'll be able to clearly see where I've stitched when I finished, so that will be a good thing for demonstration purposes. We go, taking it nice and slowly, making sure it's flat and it's not pulling, and stopping just 1.5 centimetres from the zip. Back tack to finish. Okay, there you go. You can see that nice white line going across now at the bottom of the yokes, and it's just holding that facing down. Yours won't show obviously because you'll use a matching thread, but it does just show you exactly where I've stitched. That centre front panel, as you can see, is clear, but then the sides have got that white line. And on the inside of the yoke you can see that nice white line at the bottom of the facing there. So that'll just hold the facing down nicely when you're wearing it and taking it on and off. Next, we're just going to fold back that centimetre seam allowance that we left overhanging. You can do a little bag out thing on the sewing machine, but personally I prefer to hand sew this little bit. I find it neater, but here we go, just putting a few pins in, and then I will sit down with a nice cup of tea and do a little bit of hand sew. Okay, so we've just got the hem to do now. I'm just going to show you my little bit of hand stitch. I'll give that a little press later just to make it nice and crisp. Let's do the zip up. So now the hem, I'm going to do mine the way I always do, which is turning it up and stitching because I've already overlocked it. But you can do a turn and turn if you want to. Just be careful on these points because this hem is on the cross, so it could end up a bit wobbly. So just whichever is your choice, really. So I'm just going to fold and stitch, and then those points at the front and the back, I will just come off and start again so that I get a nice crisp corner. So back tack and then finish. Then I'm folding it up again, back under the machine, back tack to start, and then off we go again. And just the same for the other side. So here we are, that's my hem. It just needs a press and the few odds and ends trimming away. There we go, nice crisp hem. Skirt finished. So we've done our yokes, we've done our facing, we've got a lovely invisible zip or concealed zip down the side. We've got pointed hem. Hopefully your skirt looks something like this. Enjoy.